Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Smith, and today I'm going to be presenting on my final project for English 190 class, which I titled A Watched Society. So this is a short story that I wrote over a few weeks, and I'm going to begin with sharing a short summary of it in case people watching this don't end up reading the whole thing, which I will also have shared with this presentation. So Sarah Freeman lives in a future where climate change has ravaged the natural world, but humanity lives on with the help of technological advances. But for many, it's far from a utopia. So she works in a virtual reality office space for a company called Ohm Inc., where she and all the other workers are closely watched. Sarah works there to pay off medical debt, but she is eventually offered a way out, and she takes it. But she is arrested for attempting to leave with unresolved debt. She's also surveilled once she is in jail, but she comes to realize that life in prison might actually be better than working under Ohm. And so the themes of this short story are definitely apocalypse, which was part of the prompt, surveillance, virtual reality, and climate change, all of which were very important topics for me to touch on. I definitely wanted to use surveillance because I had written my second paper focusing it on the idea of panopticons that the French philosopher Michel Foucault related to ways in which society is controlled, ways in which subjects in societies are controlled through surveillance, and how this can relate to the world that we know now, rather than just prisons, as the idea was originally used as. Virtual reality was also of interest to me because, as a few of you may know, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of the company that was formerly known as Facebook, has officially changed the name of Facebook to Meta in a move to try and drive interest towards their newest venture, which is the creation of the metaverse, which is a virtual reality universe where you're not only there for entertainment purposes and fun, but Mark Zuckerberg has presented it as the basically Internet 2.0, where in the future people will use it for everything, for entertainment and for work. And so while I think it may not necessarily go in the same direction that my story goes in, the idea of a digital workplace, a fully digital workplace where you can be monitored constantly, definitely reminded me of that panoptic idea where there's a small number monitoring a large number of people, and you can never really know when you're being watched. So you have to kind of constantly act, and people begin to even think differently because they never know when they're being watched or when they're not. And I could definitely see that becoming a thing for future workplaces where you work from home, but you are still highly monitored. And of course, climate change, major issue that we're dealing with today, and I don't foresee it going away. And it's an issue on many levels, but I've learned a lot through my time at UH about how climate change is going to affect the people who are already disadvantaged first and hardest. So people like Sarah Freeman who have debt will not fare as well when climate crises affect the way the world works as people who are, say, rich. And that's represented in the story as electricity being something that ends up being hard to come by, but also how people survive in this time. All right. So with that, I wanted to share an excerpt from my story, A Watched Society, to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I say all of these things. So here we go. The virtual room appeared lit with bright white light, and a translucent screen filled most of each employee's visual field with incoming tasks, messages, and a digital workspace. Seemingly endless rows of white desks filled the room beyond the screen, and each worker was represented as a floating head and a pair of hands. While Sarah could only hear Dave, Creed, and Ohm, she could see hundreds of other virtually represented employees completing tasks. Tasks she imagined were very similar to her own. Their tedious work was watched over by Ohm, their virtual manager, who floated above the center of the room. Ohm had no eyes, but the workers had the sense that they were always being watched, and they were, by the unknown entities that ran the company. The workers were surveyed constantly, and they had no access to information beyond their work there, not the broader internet, or even what time it was. Ohm would simply announce when work was done for the day, and finally one could remove their headset. This was thought to keep the workers productive. So I share this excerpt for a number of reasons. First reason being that it kind of shows visually with words the panoptic experience of this workspace, where there's one central watchtower, which is Ohm in this case, who is a virtually represented box with no eyes. That is the manager, not known to be human, multiple humans, or artificial intelligence, but watches over all of the workers while they complete their tasks. And on top of that, their screens are translucent. So all the workers are able to see Ohm at all times. So they know that they're being watched, surveilled, and managed, basically. I also wanted to touch on the fact that all of their work is very tedious. I never go into detail about exactly what they do, but I wanted to give the reader the sense that this was more about kind of control of a large group of people rather than just getting work done for this, for the sake of getting work done. And I also think that it might be an interesting point to think about that they didn't even know what time it was while they were in there. So that's just another aspect of the control that was meant to keep the workers productive and basically focused on their tasks at all times, not thinking about other things and definitely not doing other things. Okay. So the next question is, well, that's not it. Why does this story matter? Okay, so I think that I've already done a lot of explaining about, what the setup for this story is, but on a personal note, I think a lot of people can kind of empathize with Sarah's situation. While this is set in the fictional future apocalyptic world, I know a lot of people my age, especially a lot of people who are in college, are in debt and have to work a lot in order to pay that off. And I'm personally in student loan debt and medical debt. And I kind of really empathize with Sarah in that way, in that I feel like I absolutely have to work, but kind of like no matter how hard I work, it's never going to be enough because I'm always going to have to make the money and kind of immediately give it away. So I can see how like disenchanted one would become with a workspace that is really just keeping you constantly attending to the tasks. You're not able to even really think about the other things. And so essentially, Sarah is presented with the idea of being able to leave the world that she knows, which I interestingly named the Meta National Compound, implying maybe that large corporations, such as the one previously known as Facebook, have taken over the world as we know it. And there's kind of an interesting boundary between not knowing what is public and what is private. So definitely, I think of this story as a warning, but I don't think it lacks hope. So it's kind of a warning for what our future could become, but it's also the idea that once Sarah is provided even a glimmer of hope of escaping her reality, she begins to believe what she thought were just childhood myths of places in the world where climate change hadn't destroyed it, and that she had heard those stories as a child, but always just thought that they couldn't possibly be true, or never really allowed herself to think that they were true. And she finally did, and kind of relinquished herself from the life that she had been trapped in for such a long time. And while in the end, she did end up going to jail, she saw the benefit, regardless of if she was in jail or not, to be free from living under surveillance, but not just any surveillance, but capitalistic surveillance, where she had to be constantly productive for other people, constantly working for other people, and not living a happy life. When in jail, while she is still being observed in a panoptic sense, she's not forced to work for anybody. And she also doesn't have to take part in virtual reality. And yeah, so I really highly encourage, or rather hope, that all of you will read the story, because I put a lot of work and a lot of time and effort into it. And I would like to think that some people would find it interesting. So yeah, I'd be super interested in hearing your reactions to the story as a whole. As I said, I will link it with this video, and I think that's it. Thank you.